This installment on the Morgenthau Plan deals with the immediate consequences of the Second Quebec Conference. When Henry Morgenthau returned to Washington from Quebec, he told his staff, "It was the high spot of my whole career in government. The decisions reached in Quebec made it clear that Morgenthau's policies would dictate decisions made by the Cabinet Committee." On the 22nd of September, the deputy members of the Cabinet Committee met to draft the interim directive for General Eisenhower. Economist Vladimir Petrov claimed this put an end to all further opposition on the part of their colleagues from the War and State Departments. The State Department's Howard Trivers reported, Treasury representatives argued for the transformation of industrial Germany into a bucolic pasture. They were representing the views of Henry Morgenthau. Later, I wondered whether they also had been acting under Soviet instructions, if they really were members of a communist cell. The Soviets could present themselves to the Germans as the champions of the German national cause, the ultimate aim, of course, veiled at first, being a united Germany under communism. Dale Clark commented, early punitive policies tending towards economic stagnation in Germany produced a feeling of frustration in conscientious officers. Many shared the cynical conviction that a politics of planned chaos was being instituted in Germany and that the Soviet Union would be the beneficiary. On September 21st, Drew Pearson wrote a sympathetic account of the Morgenthau Plan. William Casey claimed that the Morgenthau Plan was leaked to the press intentionally. What was the purpose served by this leak? On the 24th of September, reports of the Cabinet Committee disagreement were published in other newspapers. They were largely critical of the president. Vladimir Petrov maintains that Pearson's report originated in the Treasury. Bruce Craig and Michael Beschloss suggest that Harry Dexter White, a close friend of Drew Pearson, was the source of the leak. The consequences of the publication of the plan were obvious, and this led to its apparent rejection. Doris Kearns Goodwin's account should suffice. Quote, when news of the draconian plan leaked to the press, a loud outcry arose within the Roosevelt cabinet, and the idea quietly died. However, this was another deception perpetrated by the Roosevelt administration. On Wednesday, the 27th December, the president telephoned Henry Stimson. He explained to Stimson that he did not intend to make Germany a purely agricultural nation. On the 29th, the president sent a memorandum to Secretary Hull stating, somebody has been talking not only out of turn to the papers or on facts which are not fundamentally true. No one wants to make Germany a wholly agricultural nation again, yet somebody down the line has handed this out to the press. Morgenthau was unhappy with these developments, and he wrote in his diary on the 29th, speaking to Anne Boehringer, Roosevelt's daughter, I think he ought to get Hull, Stimson, and me together in the room and read the law to all of us and tell us to stop talking. The first thing you know, they're going to spread it that the president had signed an agreement with Churchill on this thing. Secretary of Stimson described the president's behavior at an October 3rd lunch. He grinned and looked naughty and said, Henry Morgenthau pulled a boner, or an equivalent expression. Stimson then read the Quebec Agreement. Stimson described the president's reaction. Quote, he was frankly staggered by this and said he had no idea how he could have initialed this, that he had evidently done it without much thought. Dale Clark, a member of the Civil Affairs Division, recorded that Roosevelt's apparent rejection of the Morgenthau Plan was, quote, regarded as a hopeful sign by military government officials. He added that as events showed, however, it was merely an evasive statement, while policy followed the Quebec Plan. He asserted the German economy would be reduced to a level not quite completely agrarian. David Rees, Harry Dexter White's biographer, commented, the public uproar over the Morgenthau Plan and the apparent retreat from the Quebec Memorandum by President Roosevelt and Churchill obscured the fact that in the immediate aftermath of Octagon, the post-surrender draft interim directive for Germany had been approved by the President and the Cabinet Committee before its dissolution. In some of the most important provisions, the directive, an official secret document known as Joint Chief of Staff's Directive 1067, followed the spirit of the Treasury proposal for Germany. Roosevelt gave an account of Mrs. Roosevelt gave an account of Morgenthau's last meeting with the president. Henry Morgenthau himself tells the story of his last interview with my husband the night before he died. He left him with the firm conviction that Franklin still was determined not to allow any sentimental considerations to modify the conditions necessary to prevent Germany and the German people from becoming aggressors again. The president's last words to Morgenthau on his policy were, Henry, I'm with you 100%. Robert Sherwood, Roosevelt's biographer, claims Roosevelt for some reason often liked to picture himself as a frivolous fellow who did not give sufficient attention to the consequences of his remarks. This allowed him to claim that his mistakes were the result of a lack of research. There is no excuse for professional historians, however, accepting Roosevelt's contention that he initialed the Morgenthau Plan without much thought. He was willing to commit $6.5 billion of American taxpayers' money to gain British acceptance of the plan. He was willing to suffer the political costs of supporting what was to be an unpopular plan. He conducted several meetings dealing with the plan, often in heated negotiations. There are at least 2 references of his reading the information on the plan slowly and carefully. Germans may have been the primary target of this leak, and their reaction was predictable. Secretary Hull remarked, quote, if the Morgenthau Plan leaked out, as it inevitably would and shortly did, it might well mean a bitter-end German resistance that could cause the loss of thousands of American lives. Thomas Dewey, the Republican candidate for president, suggested, almost overnight, the morale of the German people seems wholly changed. Now they are fighting with a frenzy of despair. We are paying in blood for our failure to have ready an intelligent program for dealing with invaded Germany. He called the Morgenthau Plan as good as 10 fresh German divisions. His comments were dismissed as campaign comments. President Roosevelt's son-in-law, Lieutenant Colonel John Boehringer, who was not running for office, estimated that the Morgenthau Plan was worth 30 divisions to the Germans. General Omar Bradley stated, in early 1944, most men in the Allied High Command believed that victory over Germany was imminent. The near-miraculous revitalization of the German army in October had come as a shock, dissipating some of the optimism. William Casey wrote, exhorting Germans to fight to the last turned into prevent their country to become a potato patch was hardly distorting the truth. As is often the case, the truth was much more effective than the biggest lie. Captured German letters from frontline troops showed how well Goebbels had succeeded. The German Minister of Munitions, Albert Speer, claimed the Morgenthau Plan was made to order for Hitler and the party, insofar as they could point to the proof of the defeat would finally seal the German fate. Many people were actually influenced by this threat. William Donovan, the director of the Office of Strategic Services, wrote to the Joint Chiefs of Staff on the 27th of November 1944, "The horrible prospect of exile to Siberia, eternal slavery, deindustrialization, breakup of Germany, and even sterilization have been carefully portrayed to the Germans by the Nazi leaders. It is considered that the German spirit of resistance has been bolstered greatly by fear of the consequences of unconditional surrender." John Schnell reported, "By September 25th, the Morgenthau Plan was known in general outline in Germany. At the end of the month, Hitler revealed to his closest generals his intentions to launch a counterattack against the West and to retake Antwerp, even if it were necessary to weaken the Eastern Front to carry out the Western operation." John Koster, the author of Operation Snow, asserted, "The ultimate German response to the Morgenthau Plan was the Battle of the Bulge, the bloodiest contest of the war for the U.S., with 19,246 dead and 62,489 men wounded or crippled by frostbite, and 26,612 captured or missing."